Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something you, our listener, specifically asked about. And it's a topic that, well, it might seem minor, but actually has some surprising depth. Nose hair.
Yeah, those little hairs.
Exactly. Those tiny guardians in your nostrils.
Yeah.
What are they really doing? And maybe more importantly, how should we handle them?
It's a great question, actually, and we've pulled together some really interesting material to explore it. We looked at articles about the dangers, the potential downsides of plucking,
Okay.
also how our respiratory system, protects itself naturally. There's even a study connecting how much nose hair you have with asthma risk.
Really? Asthma.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. And we also dipped into a Reddit thread for some, let's say, very frank advice on managing nose hair, plus info on ingrown hairs and just a basic breakdown of how nose hair filters the air we breathe.
Right. So our mission today is pretty clear. We want to give you a solid understanding of why nose hair is, well, more important than you might think.
Right.
We'll highlight the real risks of different removal methods and guide you towards the safest ways to groom, if, that's something you choose to do.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's dive right in. The frontline defense of your respiratory system, the nose itself.
Right. So when air comes into your body, ideally through your nose, the nostrils start conditioning it, warming it up, adding moisture. But even before that, there's this sort of microscopic defense force at work.
Okay.
Lining your nasal passages and other parts of your breathing system, too, are these incredibly tiny hairs. They're called cilia. Think of them like a current that's always moving, constantly sweeping out dust and other little particles.
So they're like the first line dealing with the really tiny stuff. And then we get the more visible security guards right at the entrance.
Yeah.
The actual nose hair, or vibrissae.
Exactly, the vibrissae. Those are the ones we notice, the ones people sometimes want to manage. And yeah, they're designed to trap the bigger stuff that gets past the very entrance. It's a physical barrier, pretty straightforward.
More barrier, okay.
And working right alongside these hairs is mucus. It's produced by special cells, goblet cells, and it coats the nasal hair, makes it sticky.
Sticky, right.
Yeah, so it tracks not just dust, but also things like pollen, allergens, maybe even some bacteria and viruses. It's this layered system, all designed to stop these invaders before they get down into your lungs.
It's like a sticky web with hairy tripwires. Okay, so the size of these airborne particles must make a difference to how well this works.
It does, absolutely. Research shows that particles larger than about, say, 3 micrometers, they tend to get snagged right at the front by those nasal hairs we see.
The vibrissae again.
Right. But when you get down to the really tiny stuff, particles smaller than maybe 0.5 micrometers, the filtration isn't quite as effective. They can sneak through more easily, get further down.
That makes sense. You can almost picture those tiny pollutants just weaving around the bigger hairs. And this is really important when we think about, air pollution.
Right, absolutely. If you've got high levels of pollutants, it can just overwhelm this natural filter system. And crucially, particulate matter that's smaller than 10 micrometers, often called PM10, and especially the really fine stuff, PM2.5, that can bypass these frontline defenses.
And get into your lungs.
Exactly, into your lower respiratory system where they can potentially cause problems. So yeah, these aren't just annoying hairs, they're your body's first line of defense. Little air filters you definitely don't want to just rip out.
Okay, so our nose hair is doing some serious heavy lifting we might not even appreciate. Which brings us to the big question. How do we deal with it when it gets a bit enthusiastic? And this is where we hit those potential dangers, especially with plucking.
Yeah, plucking. It might seem like a quick fix, for the hairs you can see, but it carries some real risks. The skin inside your nostrils, it's incredibly delicate, lots of nerve endings, hair follicles. When you yank out a hair, you can actually damage that sensitive skin. You create tiny openings, little wounds, really, that can let germs get in.
Ouch. Yeah, that sounds like inviting trouble. What kind of trouble are we talking about?
Well, a common one is something called nasal vestibulitis. It's basically an infection inside the nostrils. You might see little bumps, feel irritation, maybe even pain.
Just from plucking?
Yeah, and one of our sources pointed out if you pick or scratch at these bumps, you just make it worse, create more breaks in the skin. Now, usually it's a small infection, but because everything's so interconnected up there, the tissues, the bloodstream, if it's left untreated, it can, unfortunately, escalate.
Escalate how?
To more serious things like cellulitis, which is a wider skin infection. And in really rare cases, even sepsis, that's a life-threatening blood infection.
Wow. Okay, that's a huge jump from just wanting to tidy up a bit.
Yeah.
And plucking can also lead to those really annoying ingrown hairs, can it?
Exactly. Yeah. Just like when you wax or pluck elsewhere. When that nose hair starts growing back, sometimes it curls under and grows back into the skin instead of out.
Oh,
Yeah, and that causes those familiar red bumps, discomfort, inflammation. And because the hair and the tissue around it are inflamed, it becomes a good place for bacteria to grow. That can lead to folliculitis, an infection of the hair follicle itself. Often looks like little pus-filled bumps, can be itchy or painful.
it really sounds like a domino effect of unpleasantness. And I think I remember one source mentioning something even more serious, though maybe rare, linked to plucking infections.
Yes, that's right. In very, very rare instances, plucking nose hairs can lead to something called nasal furunculosis. That's a deep, painful infection of a hair follicle, like a boil inside the nose.
Okay.
Now, the really scary part here is that this infection, again, extremely rarely, can potentially spread. It can get into the blood vessels that drain that area and lead towards the brain. This could cause something called cavernous sinus thrombosis.
That sounds serious.
It is. It's a blood clot forming behind the eye sockets. It's life-threatening if not treated quickly and could even lead to permanent brain damage. So, it really puts into perspective why avoiding anything that significantly ups the infection risk in that area is probably a good idea.
Okay, you've definitely convinced me. Plucking has moved firmly from the maybe column to the absolutely not column. Now, shifting gears a little, we also found some interesting stuff about the amount of nose hair, the density, and how that relates to health, especially asthma.
Yes, this was a fascinating study. It looked specifically at people who had seasonal rhinitis, hay fever.
Allergies.
Right. And it looked at their likelihood of also developing asthma. And what they found was that the individuals who had fewer nasal hairs had a significantly higher risk of developing asthma if they also had those seasonal allergies.
That is a surprising link. Fewer nose hairs, more asthma risk for allergy sufferers. Why?
Well, the thinking is that having a higher density of nasal hair just makes the nose better at filtering out allergens, like pollen. More hair means a more effective barrier.
Makes sense?
So if you have fewer hairs, you're potentially breathing in a higher concentration of whatever you're allergic to. And that exposure, in turn, can increase the chance of developing asthma, especially if you already have that underlying allergic sensitivity. It really underlines why maybe completely removing them isn't the best strategy, particularly if you're prone to allergies.
Right, so those hairs we complain about might actually be doing us a favor, especially the allergy sufferers among us.
Okay, that definitely makes me think twice about wanting them gone completely. But, sometimes they do get a bit visually assertive. What are the safer ways to manage them?
The clear consensus from experts is trimming. That's the recommended method.
Just trimming.
Just trimming. And importantly, contrary to that old myth, trimming your nose hair does not cause it to grow back thicker or faster. That's a common misconception about hair removal generally.
Good to bust that myth. So how do you trim safely? What's the best way?
Well, the ideal way is to use special scissors made for this. They usually have rounded tips.
Yeah, I've seen those. Right, so you don't accidentally poke or injure the inside of your nostril, and really you only need to focus on trimming the hairs that are actually visible right at the edge of the nostril. There's absolutely no need to go exploring deep inside.
Okay, so just deal with the ones sticking out. What about those little electric nose hair trimmers? Are they okay?
Yes, those can also be a safe and effective option. Look for ones that have protective guards or rounded razor heads. Again, the key principle is don't insert them too deeply. Just focus on trimming those stray hairs that are making an appearance.
So the main takeaway seems to be trim, don't pluck, and only target the ones you can actually see. Now, we've talked about why getting rid of all the hair is bad for filtration and maybe asthma risk. Are there other reasons to leave most of them alone?
Absolutely. Beyond just filtering particles like dust, pollen, and pathogens, nose hair also plays a part in keeping the air you breathe moist.
Oh, right. Humidifying.
Exactly. This can be especially helpful for people with allergies or asthma because dry air can often make their symptoms worse. By trapping a bit of moisture from the air you breathe out, nose hair helps keep your nasal passages and the air going into your lungs properly humidified. Little natural humidifiers.
It's amazing how many jobs these tiny hairs actually do.
Yeah.
Okay, but what if things go wrong sometimes? Maybe even with careful trimming. We looked into ingrown nose hairs, too.
Yes, ingrown hairs. While plucking is definitely the main culprit, they can sometimes happen after trimming, though it's less common. Maybe if a hair is cut super short or grows back at a weird angle, but yeah, much more common with plucking, tweezing, or waxing.
Right.
Like we said, it's when the hair grows back and gets trapped under the skin. And some people, especially those with naturally curly hair, tend to be more prone to them.
And what are the signs? How do you know if you have one?
Typically, you'll see a red bump. It might be irritated, itchy, maybe painful or tender to the touch. Could even look a bit like a pimple. The really important thing, though, is to resist that urge to pick at it or scratch it or try to pop it.
Easier said than done sometimes.
I know, but doing that really increases the risk of making it infected.
Okay, so no picking. What should you do?
Well, if you can actually see the tip of the hair near the surface, you could gently try to coax it out, maybe with a sterile pair of tweezers or even a clean needle. But the key word is gently. Don't go digging.
Right, no digging.
No digging, because that can cause infection or scarring. For home care, applying a warm compress can sometimes help reduce the swelling and inflammation. Some people also find a tiny bit of a natural antiseptic, like tea tree oil, can be helpful, just a dab.
And when does it become something you need to see a doctor about?
If it's something that keeps happening, like chronic ingrown hairs, or if the symptoms get worse, more pain, more swelling, or if you see pus, which is a clear sign of infection, then it's definitely time to get it checked out.
What can a doctor do?
They might prescribe things like topical retinoids or maybe steroid creams to help reduce inflammation and help the hair come out. If there's a bacterial infection, they might prescribe antibiotics. And in more severe cases, if it's formed an abscess, like a collection of pus, they might need to drain it.
Okay, so be gentle, keep it clean, and don't hesitate to get professional help if it looks infected or keeps happening. Got it. Now, we also ventured into the slightly wild world of Reddit to see how people actually manage their nose hair. Sounds like there's quite a range.
Oh, there certainly is. That Reddit discussion definitely highlighted a variety of methods with, let's say, varying degrees of recommended safety. Plucking or tweezing came up a lot, surprisingly. Some users even said the pain dulls over time or they get used to it.
Wow.
Yeah, but as we've already covered, that carries those significant risks: infection, ingrown hairs. Some people even mention doing it almost like a nervous habit or even to stay awake while driving, which sounds incredibly risky.
Yeah, definitely don't do that. What about waxing? That's another common hair removal method.
Waxing was mentioned too. Some suggested it removes hair for longer, but predictably, it's generally described as painful. And because you're putting wax inside that delicate nasal lining and then ripping it out, well, it can cause significant irritation.
And probably ingrown hairs, too.
Yes, definitely ups the risk of ingrown hairs as well. You can get home waxing kits specifically for noses, apparently, and some people even go to salons for it, despite the pain. But the potential for discomfort and complications just seems much higher than with simple trimming.
Okay. And then we'll probably get into some of the more, let's call them creative and ill-advised methods.
Indeed. Depilatory creams, like hair removal creams, mentioned but strongly discouraged. There's a very real risk of inhaling toxic fumes and chemically burning those sensitive mucous membranes inside your nose. Not good.
Definitely not.
And then there was the, frankly, alarming suggestion of using a lighter to just burn the hairs away.
Oh my gosh, no.
Exactly. Extremely dangerous. You could cause serious burns, damage your nasal passages, maybe even permanently damage your sense of smell. That's a definite do not attempt.
Absolutely. It really highlights why choosing a safe, informed method is so much better than opting for something quick or seemingly long-lasting, but actually quite risky. So bringing it all together, how do we find that balance? Grooming versus keeping the health benefits of our nose hair.
I think the key word is moderation. The goal isn't and shouldn't be total elimination. It's more about managing those visible hairs, the ones that might be a cosmetic concern for you.
Right.
So focus on just trimming the protruding hairs right at the edge of the nostrils and pay attention to how your skin reacts. If you notice any irritation, redness, bumps after your routine, that's a sign to maybe adjust your technique or be a bit more gentle or maybe trim less often.
And simple nasal hygiene probably helps too, keeping things clean.
Exactly. Keeping your nasal passages generally clean and adequately moisturized can help prevent irritation, especially after any grooming. It just keeps the whole environment happier, especially if you tend to have some sensitivity there.
Okay, so the bottom line really seems to be nose hair is important. It's playing this vital role, our body's first filter against all sorts of stuff in the air.
Yeah.
And while a little trim for cosmetic reasons is generally okay, we really need to respect its function and definitely steer clear of the more aggressive stuff like deep plucking or waxing.
Precisely. It's about finding that sweet spot, keeping things looking how you want them without compromising your respiratory health.
Well, this has been genuinely enlightening, a real deep dive into something we probably don't think about nearly enough. Thanks so much for breaking it all down for us.
My pleasure. It's always fascinating to uncover these intricate little systems our bodies have.
So the key takeaway for you, our listener, that nose hair is essential. It's filtering out harmful particles, protecting your respiratory system. We've really highlighted the dangers, the real dangers of plucking, and why safer trimming methods are the way to go. Remember, don't aim to remove those hairs completely. They are working hard for you, especially if you deal with allergies or asthma.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Consider those seemingly insignificant nose hairs. They're literally your body's first line of defense against a pretty polluted world we live in. A little careful trim can go a long way in balancing appearance and health, but it makes you wonder, what other hidden defenses might our bodies have that we just take for granted every day? Definitely something to ponder.